If you haven't watched my first mental health journey video, go and watch that before you watch this one, because it all makes a bit more sense. I think we need to start a couple of months back. I went to my doctor's to update my mental health care plan so that I could see my psychologist a few more times. I had a few worries and issues, so I needed to update that. I went to a new doctor as I live in a different area to my old doctor, and I had to go through like all my history with mental health, which we know is lengthy from the previous video, and I had to talk about my symptoms and everything that I've been going through. And she asked me a few questions and basically came to the conclusion that I should talk to a psychiatrist and get a different point of view and maybe see if there's some things that we missed. I also had a few other tests done and they all came back clear, so that's fine. I sat down and had a video chat on my phone with the psychiatrist, and he basically said to me, I think you've got borderline personality disorder. And I sort of went and didn't know how to handle it, didn't know what to say, didn't even know much about borderline personality disorder. About the only thing I knew about it was from the TV show My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which I don't think is entirely accurate. So I did my research, lived in denial for about a week and a half, then did my research and found out that it made a lot more sense for me and my life previously and where I am now. Yeah, and then later down the track, I think it was about 3 weeks after that conversation with the psychiatrist, I got a phone call from my doctor going over all the notes the psychiatrist had sent her, and I said, so do we have an official diagnosis? And she said, yep, we have DPDR, which we already knew from the previous video, I mentioned that, talked about it. You also have borderline personality disorder, so BPD, and I was like, yep, he mentioned that in the appointment. And she said, oh, and he says you've got generalized anxiety disorder as well. So I went from 1 disorder to 2, and then 2 to 3. So I feel like a triple threat. I was a bit shocked. I was in a bit of shock. I went for, it took me a long time to accept my DPDR and accept it was a part of me and who I am and how to deal with it and cope with it day to day, and just accept that this was me in my life and this is how it was going to go forward, and to use therapy and coping mechanisms to deal with the hard days. So when I got told I had BPD and generalized anxiety disorder, I felt like a whole ton of bricks had been put on me. And then spoke to Jack, my husband, and a few other people, friends mostly, and they all said to me, but really, you've been dealing with this most of your life, so it doesn't make sense that you feel different or you feel like it's gotten harder, because in reality you've been coping with it all this time. And that made me change my point of view on it. So I did my research of borderline personality disorder. I did not, however, do my research for generalized anxiety disorder until for this video actually, and there are a few things, physical symptoms that lined up with me, and I didn't even realize that they were connected to the general anxiety. I had no idea. So yeah, this is me. I've got depersonalisation and derealisation disorder, borderline personality disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. Welcome to my world. As far as treatment, my psychologist, psychiatrist and doctor all agree that I'm doing very, very well, and I've been doing therapy very well, and I'm a high functioning person considering the disorders I have, and I have great coping mechanisms for day-to-day life, so they don't think medication is necessary for me at this point in time. It's there as an option if I want it, but they didn't feel it was necessary for me to live a happy life. So that is my new diagnosis. I have talked a little bit about it. I think it's time to talk about the disorders themselves, symptoms, just like we did in the previous video, but I do want to talk about, like, for me, what I have symptom-wise, so we'll go through that. So I have some notes here to help me. I'm going to try and not read directly from this thing. Links for my sources are in the description. They are both from the Mayo Clinic website, so we know that they are good resources. I had no idea about some of these symptoms until I actually researched them. So we'll start with generalised anxiety disorder. Generalised anxiety disorder, you can have it as an adult or a child, which I found really interesting. So it covers everyone, basically. The symptoms for generalised anxiety disorder are similar to panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, or other anxieties. So if you have symptoms like this or see a few on the list, it doesn't necessarily mean you have this disorder. I recommend going and chatting to your doctor and then maybe a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a therapist just to get an idea, an official diagnosis, because I personally don't think self-diagnosis is the way to go. In many cases, generalised anxiety disorder comes along with other anxieties and mood disorders. So the fact that I have 2 other disorders with generalised anxiety is no surprise at all. Generalised anxiety disorder does improve with therapy, as we mentioned before, and medication. It doesn't necessarily mean you need medication, just depends on your situation. I personally don't need it, as I said before, but it's not to say that you should discredit medication. I think it has its place in its time. I have several friends that are on that medication and it improves their life dramatically. So let's talk about symptoms. I'm just going to read through the list for symptoms because it's a lot easier. So persistent worry or anxiety about a number of areas that are out of proportion to the impact of the events. So basically you're overreacting to a situation that shouldn't be overreacted to. Overthinking plans and solutions to all possible worst case outcomes. Perceiving situations and events as threatening even when they aren't. Difficulty handling uncertainty. Indecisiveness and fear of making the wrong decision. Inability to set aside or let go of worry. Inability to relax, feeling restless and feeling keyed up or on edge. I'd never heard of keyed up before, but on edge. Difficulty concentrating or feeling that your mind goes blank. Physical symptoms may include fatigue, trouble sleeping, muscle tension or muscle aches, trembling, feeling twitchy, nervousness or being easily startled, sweating, nausea, diarrhea or irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, and irritability in general. I found these symptoms really interesting, the physical ones in particular. I on occasion do get fatigue or exhaustion. I've had a lot of trouble sleeping, specifically in the last week and a half. Muscle tension and muscle aches is a regular thing for me, like day to day, and I know that I have some physiological issues alongside that, but all my doctors have said that I shouldn't have the amount of pain in my body that I do, so that explains that. I sweat quite a lot as well, and I didn't even think that that was connected to my disorder, so there you go. And I have IBS as well. I know, TMI, too much information, but yes, and irritability. I connect my irritability with my BPD, but we can talk about that in a little bit. I'll talk about the other symptoms. So persistent worrying, and over-worrying about things that shouldn't really be worried about in the first place. I think we've all done that. Overthinking plans and solutions and worst possible case outcomes is me. If I'm planning anything, I plan for the worst case possible outcome. And I don't think that's just necessarily the disorder. I've always been that way. My mum has always said plan for the worst possible outcome, budget-wise, like travel-wise, anything. So I've been brought up that way. Difficulty handling uncertainty. I personally have issues with this because I'm a bit of a control freak. I like to be in control of my surroundings, myself, my body, and that's led to a lot of issues in the past. I think I may have mentioned this in my previous video. So handling uncertainty is very difficult for me because uncertainty is basically out of my control, and I don't like things that are not in my control. Inability to set aside or let go of worry. I think that's just like one of the main ones. You literally just can't chill, you can't relax, you just cannot let go of that worry. Inability to relax. I have certain things that help me relax. I think it's just finding the right thing, but just sitting down doing nothing, I can't do that. I cannot sit still. I'm not that sort of person. I always have to be doing something. There's always something to be done, but I also feel like that's just part of my chef training. If you were standing still in the kitchen, there was always something to do. So I think that's carried over into my life post-chefing, where there's always something to do, like always. So I don't like sitting still and doing nothing. It's not my style. Difficulty concentrating, or the feeling that your mind goes blank. Most of the time I attribute this to my DPDR because it's more of a dissociation than my mind goes blank. I think I dissociate a bit more than I just lose concentration. So those are more like the adult symptoms. They did have a list of symptoms in children and teenagers, so I'll read those out as well. I have had a few of these in the past, back when I was younger. Some of them I still have a little bit. We can go over that in a minute. So symptoms in children and teenagers, similar worries to adults, but they may also have excessive worries about performance at school or sporting events, family members' safety, being on time, punctuality, earthquakes, nuclear war, or other catastrophic events. A child or teen with excessive worry may feel overly anxious to fit in, be a perfectionist, read your tasks because they aren't perfect the first time, spend excessive time doing homework, lack confidence, strive for approval, require a lot of reassurance about performance, have frequent stomach aches or other physical complaints, avoid going to school or avoid social situations. I think I go up and down with the social situations. I think sometimes I enjoy a social life and then other times I don't. I think the last week in particular I've been very antisocial, just because my sleep's been really bad and then my pain's been really bad and everything's been really bad. I'm actually low at the moment. So what a perfect time to talk about mental health when you're on a low. It has causes here which I found interesting. Likely arises from a complex interaction of biological and environmental factors. So nature and nurture sort of thing. May include differences in brain chemistry and function, you're born that way, genetics, you're born that way, differences in the way threats are perceived, so how you're raised to think and be aware of your surroundings. Some of the symptoms I said before, they were just sort of drilled into me as I was growing up, and development of personality, which is the same thing. I found it really interesting that women are diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder more than men. And I mean, it makes sense. I feel like as women, generally, we tend to overthink everything and think about things constantly. So it makes sense that that sort of disorder would go hand in hand with that sort of the way we think as women. So generalized anxiety disorder can lead to or cause physical problems as well. So as we said before, digestive or bowel problems such as irritable bowel syndrome or ulcers, headaches and migraines, chronic pain and illness, sleep problems and insomnia, and heart health issues, which I found very interesting. Generalized anxiety disorder often occurs along with other mental health problems, like 2 others, which can make diagnosis and treatment more challenging because, as we said before, some of the symptoms do cross over with other disorders. Some mental health disorders that commonly occur with generalized anxiety disorder include phobias, panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, depression, suicidal thoughts or suicide, and substance abuse. Prevention. I don't think there's ever a cure for mental health illnesses, so I think prevention or coping mechanisms is the best way to go. Therapy obviously is the first sign. Reach out and get help. Talk to your doctor, your psychologist, your therapist, your psychiatrist. If you think something is going on or you have generalized anxiety disorder or some form of anxiety, there is help, there is an answer. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll be cured. I don't think that word should exist when it comes to mental health. I just think it's a matter of accepting it's part of your life and, having coping mechanisms to help you deal with it day to day. Some great coping mechanisms to help deal with it is journaling. So writing all your thoughts and feelings down in a book, writing down when you have panic attacks or outbreaks, or you feel overly anxious one day or the next. Write down what your triggers are. If you know what makes you overly anxious in the first place, you can help avoid those situations. It also helps, for me personally, to be quite organised. So prioritise your energy and your time so that you don't feel overly rushed or anxious or like your life is in chaos. You know what's going on, you know what you're doing next. I have a board on my fridge that tells me my to-do list for the day, so I don't forget anything before I leave the house. I have my morning to-do lists are like, feed my boys, do my stretches, meditation. That's another thing. Meditation is fantastic, particularly deep breathing meditation. It helps calm you down and focus your mind. I think meditation was one of the best things for me. When my anxiety was at its worst a few years ago, I took up meditation, and since then it's been so much better. So I can recommend even just deep breathing. If meditation isn't really your thing, just deep breathing 2-3 times a day for a minute. It's stuff. I think breathing is so underrated. It's like the best thing you can do for yourself. So another thing to help reduce your anxiety is to avoid substances that make it worse. So caffeine, nicotine, drugs, anything that's going to hype you up and make you more nervous, any sort of illicit substance in general is not good for you. So just maybe consider if it's worth that cup of coffee or worth that energy drink, because it may be making your anxiety worse. So that's generalized anxiety disorder. Let's talk about borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder. I didn't know much about this disorder. The most I'd heard about it was from watching My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which is a great show. Love Rachel Bloom, but I felt like it was a little bit dramatized, a little bit. I'm going to read mostly from this because there's a lot to go over. Borderline personality disorder is a mental health disorder that impacts the way you think and feel about yourself and others, causing problems functioning in everyday life. So basically it just screws up your emotions and your thought processes on everything. It includes self-image issues, difficulty managing emotions and behaviour, and a pattern of unstable relationships. I look back in my past and I have to totally agree with that. With borderline personality disorder, you have an intense fear of abandonment or instability, and you may have difficulty tolerating being alone. Yet, inappropriate anger, impulsiveness, and frequent mood swings can push others away, even though you want to have a loving, lasting relationship. This is so accurate. I look back on my previous relationships and I was very angry and I would have outbursts all the time. And I think I'm very lucky to have the partner I do now, and how he is very accepting of me and my mental health problems. So when I'm having a bad day or I'm being snappy, he'll leave me alone, and then I'll realise I was mean, and I'll come out and I'll apologise and walk. So he understands it a lot of the time. My irritability, my anger is my disorder and not me. And I always apologise for my behaviour after. Something that I do not condone is using your disorders as an excuse. So just because I have BPD and I have anger problems doesn't mean I should be yelling at people and just not apologising for that behaviour. I still hurt that person's feelings. I still made them feel upset. I should take responsibility for that behaviour because it was my own. So, borderline personality disorder usually starts in early adulthood, so usually around the teenagers, and you've got all the hormones going, which is when it started for me. The condition seems to be worse in young adulthood and may gradually get better with age. It did for me. I feel like I've become a lot more in tune with my body and my emotions and my thought processes as I've gotten older, and I've realised that certain behaviours are unacceptable. And it has gotten easier as I've gotten older, and I think when you're going through puberty and you've got all the hormones going and you're already irritable in general and going through periods or hormonal changes as a man, it's just very difficult to try and cope with all of that and then the BPD on top of it. So I totally get that. Many people with this disorder get better over time with treatment. I certainly did. And you can learn to live satisfying lives. I did. I'm in a very stable, secure relationship with a loving partner. We both understand each other. Yes, we will argue sometimes, mostly me, but we're very supportive of each other, and as I said before, Jack is very understanding of my mental health disorders, and he don't understand that sometimes they take over my behaviour, but as I said, I come back and I apologise for that later down the track. So I feel very lucky to have found a strong, stable relationship. There are a few symptoms to go through, so we're going to go through them fairly quickly, and I'll just point at me if I have them or not. So symptoms. An intense fear of abandonment, even going to extreme measures to avoid real or imagined separation or rejection. Me personally, mine comes through as a deep-seated fear of dying alone. I think that's what that is for me. I don't really have an abandonment of being alone. I actually like being alone. I just don't like the idea of dying alone. I think that's my biggest fear. So that's what that is for me. A pattern of unstable, intense relationships, such as idolizing someone one moment and then suddenly believing the person doesn't care enough or is cruel. I definitely had that in the past. I don't have that now. I haven't had that for a very long time. I would say more like my teenage years I had that. Rapid changes in self-identity and self-image that include shifting goals and values and seeing yourself as bad or as if you don't exist at all. I don't know about the don't exist at all, but I do have a lot of self-image problems. I have in the past. I try to accept my body as, as I am. With the DPDR, I feel like my body changes day to day. One day I'll be happy and I'll feel like I look beautiful, and the next day I'll feel like I look bloated and fat. It's like, my body's still the same, my image of myself changes day to day, and it's very hard to deal with and cope with, but luckily I have a beautiful partner that tells me I look beautiful every day, so that helps. Periods of stress-related paranoia and loss of contact with reality, lasting from a few minutes to a few hours. I don't know about paranoia, but loss of contact with reality, definitely. I think that's sort of in relation to the DPDR a little bit, and I've definitely had that a fair whack. Impulsive and risky behaviour such as gambling, reckless driving, unsafe sex, spending sprees, binge eating or drug abuse, or sabotaging success by suddenly quitting a good job or ending a positive relationship. I used to be quite risky in my behaviour. I would say self-harming was definitely a part of that in the past. I still have impulsivity a little bit, like for example, spending sprees or binge eating. I don't know about binge eating, but I'll just go out and buy a whole bunch of snacks and come home and just eat it all. I guess that's binge eating, I guess. Suicidal threats or behaviour of self-injury, often in response to fear of separation or rejection. No, in the past, yes, I have self-harmed in the past, but no. Wide mood swings lasting from a few hours to a few days, which can include intense happiness, irritability, shame, or anxiety. Definitely me. I think this is very interconnected with the general anxiety disorder and having irritability and the anger issues and just up and down, and yeah, definitely me. Ongoing feelings of emptiness. I do have this, but I think again it's in relation to the DPDR and not feeling like I'm actually there and just feeling sort of like I'm floating from one thing to the next. So they're probably interrelated as well. Inappropriate, intense anger, such as frequently losing your temper, being sarcastic or bitter, or having physical fights. I'm not a physical person at all. I hate violence, I hate physical violence, I hate anything to do with violence, but I do use my words. I get road rage. I would say I'm a lot better than I used to be as far as my road rage, but I do get annoyed at stupid people. Like, just don't be stupid. You have your license, you should know how to drop it. Causes of borderline personality disorder. Causes are genetics and brain anomalies. So genetics, some studies of twins and families suggest that personality disorders have been inherited or strongly associated with other mental health disorders among family members. I look back in my family and it's definitely there. Brain abnormalities. Some research has shown changes in certain areas of the brain involving emotion regulation, impulsivity and aggression. In addition, certain brain chemicals that help regulate mood, such as serotonin, may not function properly. I've actually had a head CT scan. I had it a couple of months ago when I had the tests done to do with my mental health and other things, and it came back completely normal. So as far as I'm aware, I don't have any brain abnormalities. So I guess mine's just genetics. Similar to generalized anxiety disorder, borderline personality disorder can come along with other mental health disorders such as depression, alcohol or other substance misuse, anxiety disorders, which we've already gone over, eating disorders, which I've had in the past, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, other personality disorders. So altogether, it all makes sense. It all fits together for me. I've talked about my mental health to extent in the previous video, so now that I have the full diagnosis, I think personally and probably from your point of view, it all makes sense for me. I'm going to say this again, even though I've said it before and in the previous video. If you need help, if you feel like you have any of these issues or any of these symptoms, see a doctor, see a therapist, see a psychologist, see a psychiatrist. Self-medicating, self-diagnosing, me personally, I don't think it's the answer. I think the professionals are there for a reason. They know what they're doing and they know how to help you properly. There are other ways to reach out if you can't afford to see a doctor or a therapist or anything like that. And I will leave links for phone numbers and websites in the description, as well as a link to Life. It's an app I use. I'm pretty sure it's on Android and iOS, Apple. And it's basically like Facebook, but it's full of supportive people. So you can talk about your journey you're going through. You can be completely anonymous if you're scared of putting your name out there. I've had a journey for years now. I've been using Life for years. I have many supporters who have known me for years and have been commenting on my journeys and following me along with my mental and physical health journey. And I've found that it's nothing but supportive and lovely people that are willing to talk to you and help you and put a different perspective on the situations where you possibly feel you have no control or you don't know what you're doing. So I will leave links to all of that in there. I will also leave a link to Kati Morton's channel. I did this on a previous video. She is a mental health expert. She talks about all sorts of different mental health disorders in her channel, including BPD and including anxiety, and I think she's talked about DPDR in her previous videos as well. So I definitely recommend giving her a look as well if you want more information on mental health disorders or mental health illnesses. Yeah, this has been my mental health journey update. I feel very honoured to share it with you guys. I know it can be a very personal thing to talk about, and for me especially, the BPD and the generalised anxiety disorder, that's all very new for me. I've only just been diagnosed back in November, so it has taken me a while to be able to feel comfortable to record it and put it up for you guys to watch. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next video. I've got a few coming. I've already recorded a couple. I'm in the editing process. I'm going to do a whole bunch of editing this afternoon. Yeah, talk to you next time.